Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Kobold Coffers. It's like Cabal Coffers, but cheaper. I think it's funny. Anyway, as you can probably tell from the name of this channel, all the decks that I'll be breaking down here and all the decks that I play with, and hopefully that we'll have some gameplay with later on this channel, are under $100. That's no exception for today. We are going to be breaking down a deck that's under $100. I assume most of you probably came here from TikTok, but if not, go and follow me at under 100 EDH there as well for some funny videos and quicker breakdowns as well.
Today I'll be breaking down my warrior tribal deck headed by Rograkh, son of Rograkh, and Ravos Soul Tender. This is one of the first commander decks I ever built and was originally headed by Alicia, who smiles at death, who could still be the commander if you want, and I'll talk a little bit more about the advantages of that build later.
Let's talk just a little bit about how I build decks before we get into it. As a casual and budget player, sometimes the fun and flavor of the deck is a little bit more important to me than the power, which sometimes means that I'll pick a commander after I've already started build a deck, or sometimes it means I'll build an entire deck around a couple cards that I pulled in a draft. This deck has some of both of that, but that's not to discount the power of these decks. These decks can win in just about any setting that they're in the right circumstances. I've won at local game stores or with my friends who play with higher powered or more expensive decks. So if you're interested, don't write these off just because I built them because I thought they were fun.
I started playing around the time that Ikoria Lair of Behemoths was coming out, and my brothers, who've played for years, invited me to participate in some bundle drafts for it. In one of those, I pulled Winota, Joiner of Forces, and as a brand new player, I basically only recognized that she was rare and legendary. I didn't really understand everything about her ability, but I ran her anyway, and I loved it. At the time, my brothers didn't play EDH as much as we do now, but they told me if I was interested, I could make her into a commander deck. I liked that idea, but I had already pretty quickly realized that my favorite color in Magic was black, and my brothers had some other warrior cards from Tarkir laying around, and I thought that that seemed like a really cool idea. So they told me about color identities and introduced me to Alicia, who smiles at death, and I was sold. So first let's talk about the commanders. Rograkh, son of Rograkh, and Ravos Soul Tender are the actual commanders for this deck, but the secret commander, as we kind of talked about, is Winota, Joiner of Forces. She's a 4/4 human warrior for 2 red white, and she says whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a human creature card from among them into the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So as you'll see, pretty much our whole deck is built around that ability. So it's kind of split humans and non-humans to maximize the effect. But we do have our other commanders, which one is a human and one is a non-human, but obviously we won't be pulling Ravos out of the deck. Ravos is a human cleric for 3 white black who gives all our other creatures +1/1 and says that at the beginning of our upkeep we can return 1 creature card from our graveyard to our hand. And Rograkh is a 0/1 Kobold who has Menace, First Strike, and Trample, who costs 0, who is a warrior who can trigger Winota as a non-human source. They're both pretty useful, but let's dive into the rest of the deck tech and we'll get back to them. I've broken down the deck into some categories, starting with getting what we need. In this deck, we're running a few tutor effects that we'll usually be using to find Winota, but we can sometimes use to find our other key pieces. Diabolic Tutor will be familiar to most budget Magic players and is perfect for when we've got some non-humans on the board and are ready to attack as soon as Winota hits the battlefield. Another budget-friendly tutor specifically for this kind of situation is Search for Glory, which lets us find a legendary Snow or Saga card. We probably won't be gaining any life from this unless we choose to run Snowlands. We also have Open the Armory to help us get the best weapon for the occasion. I recently updated this deck and added Sword of the Animist, which not only helps us get what we need land-wise, but also is a great target for this tutor specifically. We're also running some auras and equipments in our bigger and better category that we can also use this to find. Then we have a few cards that help us draw into our heavy hitters and key pieces. Most of these help us in more ways than one. Greven Predator Captain lets us sacrifice creatures to draw cards. Now, we'll almost always be paying life for the cards that we draw in this deck, but this also gives us the additional benefit of Greven getting bigger and being able to swing through for extra damage. As you'll see, we don't mind sacking and reusing some of our creatures either. We also have Raider Spoils, which will also cost us life, but also boost our creatures, making it easier for our warriors to deal combat damage to a player and draw into what we need. Additionally, we have Species Specialist, who is a pretty good card in any tribal deck running black, but is extra good in this deck, seeing as it is a warrior and a human, which are both relevant types for this deck. Usually we'll be selecting warriors for the creature type, but if our opponents are creating a lot of specific tokens, we can select that creature type as well. Or even with this deck, selecting goblins will sometimes be our best bet, but we'll get into that in a bit. Our next section is, to me, the most fun and interesting. This is a very creature-heavy deck, and it specifically focuses on making our creatures bigger and better. To start out, we have a few of the first warrior cards to catch my eye in the Mordu colors. Chief of the Edge and Scale are both small and easily castable creatures that add a power and toughness respectively to all our other warriors. Along with them, we have Herald of Dromoka, which gives each of our other warriors vigilance, and along with that, we have Bloodshin Rager, who when attacking gives our warriors menace. I took those ideas and searched for other warriors that would boost my team, and I very quickly came across other sets that cared about warriors, like Battle Bond and Zendikar Rising. We have Rushblade Commander giving our team's warriors haste, and Kargan War Leader giving our other warriors +1/1. Going back to Tarkir, I found some more ability boosters, including Ankle Shanker, Dragon Scale General, and Ashion Foremost. Ankle Shanker is a great enabler for this deck, seeing as we need attacking triggers, and he makes our creatures a lot safer in combat. Bolstering is a great asset with all of our tapped creatures, and Double Strike can make some of our big creatures life-threatening.
A couple other cards pulled in a draft. We have General's Enforcer, which makes all of our legendary humans indestructible, of which we obviously have quite a few, and Frenzied Saddle Brute, which gives all the creatures on the board haste as long as they're not attacking us or planeswalkers that we control. In addition to all these creatures, to boost our team, we also have some enchantments and equipments like Angelic Gift, Iona's Blessing, and Unquestioned Authority. All are fantastic things to add to one of our key pieces or a heavy hitter. They also help us draw a few cards along the way. In addition, we have enchantments like Street Riot and Sanctuary Lockdown to boost our team and add utility. Glass of the Guild Pact also falls into this kind of static boost ability category for our multicolored creatures. As far as equipment goes, we have Prowler's Helm, Pin Blade, and Amorphous Axe, as well as Sword of the Animist, as we discussed earlier. These are fairly self-explanatory, though we've got to be careful when we use Amorphous Axe, because generally making something a human and a warrior is good, but when we're trying to trigger Winota with as many non-human creatures as possible, we've got to watch out.
We also have some legendary creatures to help with our efforts. Lovisa Kodais, Jorkadim the Purveiler, Tajik the Legion's Edge, and General Kudro of Dranith all help us in somewhat different ways. Lovisa is a rock star in this deck, making our creatures huge and giving them haste. Jorkadim makes combat much less intimidating, even for our smallest Kobold, as long as we have 3 artifacts in play, which we can usually pull off. General Kudro boosts all of our humans, in addition to having repeatable graveyard hate and emergency removal stapled on, and Tajik prevents all non-combat damage that would be dealt to our creatures, as well as being able to mentor our smaller creatures. Moving on to our next section, we'll discuss other creatures that make up our Mordu Horde. First off, we've got some actual Mordu champions. Zurgo Helm Smasher, the former Khan of the Mordu himself, as well as the Butcher of the Horde, a formidable demon who can help us with a variety of things. We don't always need a free sack outlet, but as most EDH players know, they sometimes come in handy at the strangest times. If you are looking to build around commander damage wins, Zurgo is another great alternative commander, protecting himself and easily getting huge, especially in this deck. We also have Mordu Ascendancy to help fill our board with creatures and help protect our creatures in a pinch. This is why it's sometimes advantageous to select Goblin when we play Species Specialist. We also have a few other warriors to round out our roster, with Aven Skirmisher, Spike Jester, and Dreadhorde Butcher. These are cheap, non-human sources to trigger Winota as efficiently as possible. We also have some creatures to help with our warrior theme, with Boldware Intimidator, Kargan Intimidator, and Broin Stoutarm. These help us get through during combat and gain some life in the process. Now that's most of the creatures we have in this deck. We will go over a couple more in our last few sections. First, let's go over our methods of removal. We've got a few instants and sorceries like Justice Strike, Tail Slash, Mortify. These are all pretty simple classic removals, but we're also running things like Goblin Cratermaker, which can handle some artifacts, or even Eldrazi, and was my favorite companion with Alicia to bring out of the graveyard and immediately sack again. He's also a non-human source who can trigger Winota and then die. Light of Hope can be used to get rid of an annoying enchantment, but if that's not needed, we can use any of its other modes. Ingoruk's Wake is a classic board wipe, but notably one-sided because of how creature-heavy our strategy is. Path of Metal doesn't really do much when it enters, except for maybe clearing some smaller creatures from the board, but when it transforms, we can use its last ability, if we have some extra mana, to help clear away our opponent's more evasive creatures. Burning Anger is great to equip to creatures like Zurgo that are going to be huge, and especially if they have Vigilance, they can attack and then tap. Tybalt's Trickery is an interesting card in this deck, one of the only counters in red, and generally something you'll want to hold on to until you know the card you're countering is worse than whatever might come. Or if you're my brother, you play a 1-drop Aven Skirmisher, counter yourself, and flip into Broin Stoutarm. Only a bit of a mana saver, but worked for him. Alright, moving on to our Waste Not section. We have some pretty straightforward cards like Dutiful Attendant, Raised Dead, Blood Beckoning, and then we also have Ravos to help with this as well. But, like I mentioned, Alicia Who Smiles at Death used to be the commander for this deck, and so a lot of the creatures are small because of her second ability, which says, When Alicia So Smiles at Death attacks, you may pay Orzhov. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. This is a fantastic ability with a lot of our small warriors, and a lot of them will enter bigger than they were in the graveyard, so even if they only have 2 power in the graveyard, they can come in with, up to 7 or something pretty easily with this deck. She's obviously still a really good commander for this deck. I was just in a position that I felt like upgrading, and I really like Rograkh, so I went and found Ravos, and I'm super happy with how the deck runs in this iteration as well. Our lands are pretty straightforward. I do run lands like Looming Spires and Sunhome Forge of the Legion that can help us out in combat, as well as Nomad Outpost and Savai Triome. Now, I pulled the Triome in a draft, so if you're looking to go budget, don't spend the extra money on that, though it still is under $100 with it in the deck. Now we'll talk about our win conditions. Obviously, the dream is to get Winota out with 3 or 4 non-humans who can attack and then flip into like Lavisa, Jorkadim, Greven Predator Captain, but in addition to flooding the board, we have some other methods to kill our opponents. As far as creatures are concerned, we have Brutal Horde Chief, who not only heavily drains our opponents when we attack, but can also let us pick how each of their creatures blocks during combat. We also have Subjugator Angel, who taps all of one of our opponent's creatures as it enters the battlefield, an effect so good it gets to be one of our few non-warriors in this deck. We also have Bond of Discipline and Rush of Battle, just to brute force our way through if we need to. Usually one of these methods is how we close out the game, but we can also use like Prowler's Helm, Timur Battle Rage, Active Treason, or things like that to take out our opponents. One other fun way that I've taken people out is using Dragon Throne of Tarkir. It's kind of a unique artifact that costs 4 to cast and 3 to equip, and it says equipped creature has Defender and pay 2 and tap. Other creatures you control gain trample and get plus XX until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. I think when I did it, I equipped it to Zergo Helm Smasher and gave everything like plus 8/8 and trample, and then I swung out for the win. Just as a note, sitting here editing this video, I've been working on it for weeks now, and I work 2 other jobs, and this is a hobby, and it's just taken me a lot longer than I thought it would, and so I want to put it out, and so I'm not going to go back and add all the prices like I was going to do, but I will put the whole deck list in the description, and you should be able to see all the prices and stuff there. But I hope that you enjoyed this video and that I will have a little bit more of an idea of what I'm getting into the next time I try to do one.
There we have it, our very first deck tech on under 100 EDH. I hope you guys liked it. Hopefully there'll be more of these videos coming and maybe some gameplay if I can get me and my brothers and my friends all in the same place to make a video at some point. If you did like it, go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite card in this deck was, or if you have any suggestions for this deck, please let me know. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram and TikTok at the same name. And until next time, don't wipe out your bank account just to wipe the board.